Assalamu alaikum, Fahad. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Walaikum Assalam. Thank you so much, Amara.
It's an honor to have you today on Merafuture's platform. So, for the audience, we have Fahad Raza with us today. He is currently the CEO of Chaar Bhai, and he also founded Fahad Raza Photography in 2009. So, basically, Fahad, what inspired you to become an entrepreneur, and what passion do you have with regards to photography?
Thank you so much, Amara. Thank you so much for the introduction. So basically, what inspired me to be an entrepreneur is, and what inspired me to be a photographer. I think both have come inherently to me. I have an entrepreneurial mindset since as far as I can remember, and I've always liked taking pictures. As luck would have it, and as we're speaking on a career counseling platform. I had a lack of career counseling when I was growing up. So
Mhm,
I ended up getting a management degree, like it or not. But I actually did love while I was at it.
mhm,
So what I learned at school, alongside my inherent like of being an entrepreneur, like just doing small trades, just making small bits of money here and there. And
mhm,
with the business degree, so I interned at Coke, which is an FMCG. I interned at Johnson and Johnson's. So I learned sales at Coke. I learned how to pre-sell. I went out in the fields. I learned uh, above the line and below the line campaigns while I was at Johnson and Johnson's in Karachi. So I
mhm,
used to be at brand activations. So that alongside my degree, and then eventually the first job I landed in was at a cinema. So
mhm,
I have an experience of how to run a cinema, what movies to play, um, what to sell at concessions, basically all the operations of a cinema. And
mhm.
then I landed up as an MTO in a bank. So I have a years of banking experience as well. So that all accumulated into me forming Chaar Bhai as a private limited company in 2014 while I was still at the bank. So
Okay.
that was probably my last phase of learning the tricks of
Mhm,
entrepreneurship while actually doing them.
mhm.
And that was the time when I set up the first uh, private limited company of the two that I now have.
ठीक है. So why photography?
Probably because since photography was the one thing that I enjoyed the most,
Mhm,
um, and probably not just photography. It's just that I have been a keen observer since always. So I would just appreciate the surroundings always.
mhm.
And I know that memory isn't infinite, so you can't just have a very vivid recall of what you see. So I've always intended to take photographs of wherever I went since film days. So when I was still a sophomore at university, someone was getting engaged. I was the first person in my campus to have a
Mhm,
DSLR. And the So basically, there was this couple getting engaged, and they got me that gig. This is in 2009 when DSLRs weren't very common. So the first money that I made outside of teaching tuitions that I used to at that time was from photography. And it
okay.
grew as I grew within my degree. So by the time I graduated, I was able to fund my final semester's fee. So
Mhm,
I was making decent money by then. So I thought, why not just venture into what I love doing
mhm.
and leave the rest.
That's very interesting. Um, so I was looking at your education background. You started out as a management student, like you mentioned, you had a BBA degree. Then you went on to get a project management degree, and finally you landed yourself at NCA. How does someone who started out as a business graduate eventually become interested in arts? How was the entire journey? I mean, shifting from one degree to the other.
So basically, as we said, as I had a lack of career counseling, my management degree did teach me a lot. Probably most of what I know. Probably how to deal with the outside of outside world in how to live it, the real life. But
Mhm.
the project management degree I think was important because I did not really like project management back in the university, and
Mhm.
to be able to run something, make something from scratch and be able to build it up, which is an international company now. I
Mhm.
think project management is a required skill. So
Definitely.
the only reason that I was able to scale my business to geographical beyond geographical boundaries was because I established an MIS in 2015. So which basically
Mhm.
decentralized most of the operations that run around a wedding photography business. So this has
Mhm.
enabled me to be able to operate in multiple cities at the same time simultaneously. So there have been days where we've been covering simultaneously in London, in Hunza, in Swat, in Lahore, in Karachi, and in Islamabad at the same time. So
Okay.
I was only able to scale this thing to such a level because I think the required skills were to be learned from the project management degree.
So when you shifted from project management towards an arts field, did you face any criticism?
So criticism, I think pretty old and well into my career by the time I chose to go to NCA. The Chaar Bhai Private Limited was already there. I had already done two jobs after graduating, so I was probably mature enough to be able to make my own decisions. So no resistance came from home.
Mhm.
Um, Friends have always been very appreciative of what I've been doing. So getting into an NCA was an easy transition, and I think
Mhm.
a very necessary one because I thought that while doing all of this, and still the passion of photography was there, but I think I had lost direction. And
Mhm.
for me to be able to scale it globally, um, it also required to be perfect. So I couldn't have made it perfect without having formal education in the
Mhm.
field that I was pursuing.
So everything
So,
basically fit in together.
so yes, the last of them all was this degree that I did from NCA.
Mhm. So let's talk about photography. What do you think are the skills required to become a photographer, a good one?
So a good photographer is very patient.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be an impatient person and be a photographer at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a very keen eye. You have to be very observant. You
Mm-hmm.
have to be a good listener, and I think you have to be physically fit. You have to be active, um, and you have to have discipline in your life because because whether you're a journalist, whether you're a wedding photographer, whether you're a nature photographer, whether you're whether you're a product photographer, things won't happen twice. So you have to
Yeah.
have discipline in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yes, I think those are the most required skills.
ठीक है, ठीक है. So you've done photography. How's your experience been? Any good experiences, bad experiences? You said that you covered weddings and other events. How was it when you started out?
So, so the best experience was back in 2000 and I think 11 when I was still a
Mm-hmm.
student at last. And so I had this call about a wedding that was scheduled to be in Peshawar. This is probably the third or the fourth event that I'll be doing. Um,
Okay.
so I don't have an office, and I live in Town, which is not very accessible to the mainland Islamabad back in those
Mm-hmm.
days. So I have these guys come over to the university. So there's this white Land Cruiser parked outside the university. I took the boys to the university cafeteria. We had a casual conversation, discussed details, and the day that I reached, I was driven. So I did not have a car. I took a bus to Peshawar. I was
Okay.
picked up by them, and I was driven
Mm-hmm.
to the governor's house. And
Mm-hmm.
I could not understand. I was like, if it's someone who's related to the governor, who's getting married, probably a cousin or something. But eventually turned out that the boys who came to see me were the sons of the governor of KP.
Okay.
And the third wedding
Mm-hmm.
that I did was the governor's son's wedding in Peshawar, and that was a surprise. I was alone, and I had to manage a 5,000 people event by myself with
And
all
how did that?
dignitaries included, with all dignitaries included, higher officials from the People's Party, from the then ruling party, and the KP government, and the federal cabinet, including the prime minister. So that was crazy, a lot of running around, but I think
Definitely.
it was a job very well done. I'm still proud of it. I still display it on the center
Yeah.
table in my office. Yeah, so that was a job that I was very proud of back then and still am.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a very difficult job to learn. Acha. So, if we talk about photography, you went from management towards the arts. So, do you think this is the ideal career path, especially for students today? Is there any other career path that you would suggest to become a photographer?
So basically, I don't depends on stage in life they are at. So if they're still deciding on what degree they need to be doing, or if they're still in their intermediate or pre-intermediate secondary school, um, so they basically
Mm-hmm.
need to see what their aptitude is, what they want to do. There are different genres of photography. If you want to be a photojournalist, if you want to be a documentary photographer, if you want to document war, if you want to document the street, if you want to document news, I think the required degree for that would be journalism, because there's minors in journalism which teach you photography,
Okay.
relevant to journalism. Um, if you want to be a wedding photographer, I think the ideal combination is what I am. You need to have a management degree because weddings are chaotic in Pakistan, and wedding is
Mm-hmm.
big business. And with weddings, you can always branch out. If you have a management degree, if you know how to run a corporation,
Mm-hmm.
wedding industry is so huge that you can always satisfy the need of photography that you do have the urge. You can satisfy that urge, and you can still branch out and make more money, expanding into event management, getting more creative with getting connections with the designers, with choreographers, with venues. So you can basically branch out and expand into making it into a huge corporation
Okay.
centered around wedding. So if you want to be a wedding photographer, the perfect degree for you to be having is a marketing degree.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, um, if you want to be a product photographer, you need to have a marketing degree. You need to know how brands work. You need to be able to understand different requirements for different aesthetic behind each brand. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so if you want to be a product photographer, if commercial photography is your thing, I I think you need to have marketing, at least some marketing knowledge. So I wouldn't suggest. So whatever I'm saying, I won't suggest degrees. You can probably take courses. You can probably do diplomas. But if you want to venture into journalism, you need to study journalism. You cannot document without knowing how news works. You cannot document
You need
without
formal
knowing what
education.
propaganda is, what negative propaganda is, what positive propaganda is. You need to be able to differentiate between the right and the wrong. You need to have that knowledge to be able to become a documentary photographer. Anyone who can use a camera would not be able to do justice if the situation requires of that. Similarly,
Mm-hmm.
a product photographer, any photographer who knows how to use a camera and the light, but does not know how brands work, how
Mm-hmm.
still life works, would not be able to produce quality product images. So you need to
Definitely.
have relevant skill sets to be able to venture into specific fields in photography.
So basically, if you want to go for photography, you need to be sure what you want to do when it comes to photography, and then choose a career or a degree according to that. That's what
Probably.
you're saying.
Yes. Yes, because so I love documentary, but I do not have a journalism degree. So even though I document things, but I do not have the discipline. B, I do not have the knowledge or the connections to be where I need to be when I need to be.
Mm,
And C, I don't have the correct exposure. While growing up, I didn't get the correct exposure to venture into the field of journalism. So I think if
mm.
I was pursuing a journalism degree or diploma, it would have been easier for me to venture into journalism or wildlife or documentary rather than getting into weddings. weddings was the easiest catch while I was growing up. I capitalized
Mm-hmm.
on it, and I've made up on it. So wedding gave me exposure to and connected me, networked me with the people at different corporations. So I now do product photography as well, and I do food photography as well. But I am
Mm-hmm.
able to be a food photographer or product photographer is because I have a marketing background and a marketing. So, but I can be a journalist, photojournalist. I don't think I can be a professional photojournalist because I don't have the necessary education required.
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting point. I've never thought about things that way, that you have to be so clear as to what you want to do.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to photography, what do you think about the scope? I mean, when somebody like me at least, we think of photography, we think it's just, just taking pictures and stuff. What is the scope of it exactly, considering how quickly the world is changing? There are new technologies. There's so much going on. So, how do you think the scope of photography is changing as time passes?
So it was only until as far as I can recall, it was 2005 when I was still shooting film alongside a compact digital camera. So I was
Okay.
professionally shooting film, and I had a
Mhm.
subcompact carry around pocket camera for digital.
Mhm.
Um, in 2008, DSLRs started becoming mainstream. Um,
Mhm.
and at the same year, in 2008, Olympus and Panasonic merged to make a smaller sized camera, basically make DSLRs smaller. And they started calling them mirrorless because DSLRs are basically consisted of a pentaprism which reflects light onto the viewfinder where the photographer basically makes a frame.
Okay.
So this new technology eliminated this pentaprism and replaced it with an electronic viewfinder, which was a screen as you use in your phone. So
Mhm.
10 years down the road in 2018, um,
Mhm.
these mirrorless cameras started gaining on to DSLRs, and in
Yeah.
2021, DSLRs
Mhm.
have almost vanished. So huge giants like Nikon and Canon
Mhm.
have probably ceased manufacture of high-end DSLRs, and they've shifted completely to mirrorless. So technology is changing very rapidly. So,
It is.
and with the change in technology, it has become very easy for people to take better pictures. It has
Mhm.
also become very easy. Um, so technically, older cameras would not have a higher dynamic range. If I had to expose a scene which had bright highlights and detail in shadows, I would have to take 5 images and then merge them together to
Mhm.
recover detail from each part of the scene.
Yeah.
Modern cameras, I can just take one exposure and recover details from any part of the image. So that's
Mhm.
how advanced the technology has become. There's no need to develop those basic skills anymore. The camera does it for you. So I think the entry barrier has been reduced. So there's a great scope, and still a huge room to fill in as far as photographers are concerned, because
Mhm.
we do not have quality content in Pakistan. Despite having a lot of photographers, we do not have photographers who understand what they're doing. So,
Mhm.
so if someone has the right gear in today's day and age, they just need to focus on the right channel where they need to think and
Mhm.
probably master the trade that they're doing.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Even though the entry barriers are becoming easy, the demand for quality and the right photograph or the right shot is what matters.
Yes.
And अब देख भी सकते हैं, I mean, unfortunately, there are so many cases where you hear people, they're trying to get the best shot and they get injured, and some people actually lose their lives. So you need to be
So
careful.
So for that, you need to have planning. I've taken shoots. I've done shoots. When you're a landscape photographer, you would actually have to check weather, check the phases of moon, check if you'd be able to see the sky for the shot that you're making. Even for wedding photography, I have planned a shot for which I had to drive around 1,600 kilometers. I
Hmm.
had to go to the location that I had scouted to scout the approach for a wedding party. Um,
Okay.
during daylight, it was halfway to Gwadar from Karachi, so that's a 6 hour journey. So first to be able to get to see the approach, it was a 6 hour drive. Then we came back. Then we drove again to see when the sun would rise, so that we could just time that day exactly, and where the sun would rise from, how would it look. So that was the second drive,
That's a
and the
lot of
third
work.
drive, was with the bride. So this was before I got to know of the app that could plan all of this for me, but the approach. So probably would have saved me 2 trips. But then
Mm,
again, technology has moved so that you can just set a pinpoint and be able to see in real life how the sun would move across during the day. So that's how advanced technology is. So planning a photograph has become a lot more easier. Um,
yeah,
but,
compared to your time,
but
basically.
differentiating has become much more difficult, and coming up with
Mm,
something new has become much more difficult.
definitely, definitely. Acha, let's talk a bit about entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
My first question to you is, what are the myths that surround entrepreneurship?
What are the myths that surround around it? Okay, so um, the first, जब आप छोटे होते हैं और आप पैसे कमाते हैं तो आपके घर वालों के आसपास जाने वाले लोग कहते हैं कि अगर इतनी छोटी उम्र में पैसों की आदत लग जाएगी तो खराब हो जाएगी.
Mhm,
So that's
mhm,
the first and foremost myth that surrounds our society, हमारी
mhm,
देसी culture. Because we think we have a set pattern. Okay, you have to have a matric degree or an O levels or FSC and A levels and then a degree, and then you're free to choose what you do. So
mhm,
basically, before graduating, you're basically driven. You're expected to do your matric, your FSC, and your undergrad. And no one wants to see you make money because they think you'll be spoiled if you have spare cash on you.
mhm.
But I think that's the biggest mistake that one could make. If you think your kid is doing barter trade with someone, let them do it. Because I think that just encourages their entrepreneurial skills, that encourages their interpersonal skills as well. Um, Secondly, um, you need a lot of capital to be an entrepreneur. Is that a myth? I think yes. A lot of people are scared to start their own ventures because they think they don't have capital to start. I
Mhm,
think that entrepreneurs, the basic skill to be an entrepreneur is to be able to start something from scratch. I have a registered company in Canada and in Pakistan, and I started from 50,000 rupees I made out of teaching kids tuitions and working at a call center. So, so the biggest myth involving entrepreneurship might be that you need a lot of cash. I think you need to have the right skill set
mhm.
and the right connections and the right approach and a clear goal um,
Yeah.
when you're starting. I love to travel,
There's a,
so I love to travel and I love to take pictures. So I envisioned myself taking pictures at all of those exotic locations that we see over the internet. So
mm,
for that, I have probably grown and developed this into something that is now based out of Canada and in Pakistan.
mm,
So that I would, so that's if I did not have this vision, I would not have been able to come this forward.
yeah.
So आई थिंक कि पैसे नहीं चाहिए होते विजन चाहिए होता है एंटरप्रेन्योर बनने
Mm.
के लिए दूसरा यू नीड टू हैव
मैं
अ
एक बात ऐड
क्रिएटिव
करती जाऊँ, if it's fine. वैसे भी I definitely agree कि आजकल if you want to pursue something that you are passionate about, आजकल वैसे भी इतनी programs हैं, इतने schemes हैं जिसमें the youth is being encouraged to start their businesses and they will be provided the capital. So I guess you're right. इस चीज की वजह से people shouldn't be hesitant.
एग्जैक्टली the only thing required is the right direction
Mm-hmm.
to move on and persistence
Mm-hmm.
and I think um, you can only get directions if you read if you're just adaptive if you're curious and if you're aware of the surroundings around.
Mm-hmm.
I think
ठीक
you need
ठीक.
to have a direction
Hmm.
and
So yeah, please continue.
right.
So basically, for example, अगर किसी को मतलब एक तरह से feel होता है कि they have that entrepreneurial mindset, right? So what should they do? Should they, especially if they're at a young age, what would you suggest? I mean, should they just start trying out businesses or should they work on their skills? Is there anything they should do, like read certain resources or watch documentaries, videos?
So as a kid now, the resources that are available to you, documentaries and videos are a must. You can just subscribe to some entrepreneurship related Facebook pages or Instagram pages and just keep getting those motivational quotes and basically drive your mind into thinking that entrepreneurial way, into thinking out of the box. So that is one thing that you can do. And subscribe to a good Instagram channel and
Okay.
view those. Secondly, I think you need to be a keen observer. I cannot stress on it enough. You need to be able, if you're out with your dad, I'm assuming you're young, if you're out with your friends, if you're out with your family, just keep observing any and all interactions that are happening around you,
Mm-hmm.
be it personal, be it with someone, if you're purchasing something, if there's a street vendor. I think
Mm-hmm.
if you're very observant of interactions happening between people, that gives you the idea of how to actually behave with different sets of people. You also need to be able to understand cultural differences. So from a young age, if that interests you, if different languages interest you, if different cuisines interest you, you need to be able to observe people and interactions, because
Mm-hmm.
that is one key element that would help you paramount when you're an entrepreneur, when you have to deal with all sorts of people all the
Mm-hmm.
time. So so as a kid, subscribe to something on Instagram and start observing every interaction around you, because that
Mm-hmm.
matters.
ठीक ठीक अच्छा how was your experience of setting up your firm Fahad Raza Photography? What were the difficulties you faced and how did you overcome them?
So the first difficulty with Father of Photography was a lot of resistance from extended family, not even extended family, but acquaintances, so family friends. So
Mm-hmm.
while my parents were fine with what I was doing, happily, gladly or not, I don't know, but they were fine with that, what I was doing. But the people who used to come to our place were like, your dad is an engineer, your mom is a doctor, what are you doing with the camera? And that is what I used to listen to for the first year or so. But eventually it faded out.
Mm-hmm.
So the first resistance came from friends of the family.
Yeah.
The second resistance, honestly, I don't think I've had a fun time. I don't think I've had resistances because um, I was into something. I was into doing something that I actually loved doing, and I tried to make it right. So that gave me business. More business gave me more motivation to do the right thing, and
Mm-hmm.
that resulted in a chain reaction. So,
Mm-hmm.
but the biggest challenge was, in fact, to streamline. I think it took me years to come from Fahad Raza Photography to Chaar Bhai, being owned by multiple owners, to Chaar Bhai being owned by me solely, to Chaar Bhai going out of Pakistan. So if we take the photography journey, I think the whole of it has taken a lot of time for me to grow from Fahad as a photographer, because where I am right now is probably the middle of where I wanted to be. But finding out where I wanted to be was the biggest problem, which is still being figured
Yeah.
out. I think so that so if we put it that way, it would probably be better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned Chaar Bhai. What is Chaar Bhai all about?
So, Chaar Bhai was initially formed with two of my friends from university and a mentor who taught me how to use Photoshop. Um, it never kicked off with the four people, but we ventured that we'd have all corners covered. And since we were four people, so that was basically it. We started doing wedding and corporate photography. This was right after graduating from university and landing my street bank job, and thinking that I could not no longer be able to manage fathers of photography by myself. So this is when I decided to bring three of my friends on board. One never joined. The two of them joined. One is still with me um, uh, in a consultancy capacity. The other one has been bought off. But Chaar Bhai started off as four friends who would keep all bases covered primarily. Um, and uh, it was based out of Lahore, Islamabad, and Peshawar back then.
Mhm. So
Eventually,
इस
जी.
इसमें एक चीज में जहन में आई अक्सर सुनने में आता है कि people say that you shouldn't start a business with either your friends or your family. Is that true? And how has your experience been with regards to that?
So one of the bhais is my distant relative who's there as a
Okay.
consultant. The
Mm-hmm.
friend that who's no longer with me is still a very good friend of mine. So you should not start a business with your family or friends if you cannot detach business and emotions. But but if you can detach your relationship with that person and your business, I don't think this should be a problem. And it depends on how understanding the both of you are with each other, how deeply you care about the relationship as well as the business. So I think if things are set straight, if rules are laid in place, I don't think there should be a problem with that. Because I've
Mm-hmm.
been there, I've done that. I've made a partnership, I've grown out of a partnership, and I formed new partnerships. But I think it's if you can take it emotionally, I think there shouldn't be an issue. But
अच्छा
it's emotional, it's not financial.
कोई are there any red flags? I mean, जैसे अब कुछ दोस्तों ने मिलके business start किया है, तो sometimes they're like, ओ contract की जरूरत नहीं है या चलो finances का बाद में देख लेंगे अभी मैं पैसे डाल देता हूँ तो how should people go about it if they do start a business with their friends from scratch? So what are some things that you advise?
So the first thing you need to do is invest in a good lawyer. Go to someone who knows what they're doing and
Okay.
tell them what you want. So
Mm-hmm.
there's this thing, never hide anything from your lawyer and your doctor. So if you want a fix,
Okay.
you need to be able to tell
Mm-hmm.
the lawyer the exact dynamics that you have in mind so that he's able to figure out any discrepancies, any
Mm-hmm.
legal problems with the plan that you may have, and then suggest alternates which are viable to all of you, and then be able to document and draft a contract which you're able to sign and legally bind you to terms. So ideally, they need to be distinctive roles defined. There should be boundaries. One should not intervene with the other person's affairs. So all those legalities need to be set out by a lawyer. So the first and foremost thing
Mm-hmm.
that one needs to do is go to a lawyer, get this documented,
Okay.
and decide
Mm-hmm.
who owns who, what percentage is being put in, how are profits divided, what kind of money is retained. This is very important. When you're starting business with your friends, you do not realize कि अच्छा हम प्रॉफिट स्प्लिट कर लेंगे हम प्रॉफिट्स कैलकुलेट कब करेंगे हम प्रॉफिट्स कैलकुलेट किस बेस पे करेंगे हम अकाउंट्स कैसे अगर हमने बिजनेस भी पढ़ा हुआ है तो भी हम लोग ये नहीं देखते कि भाई क्या क्रूड इनकम है क्या क्रूड एक्सपेंस है जो पैसे आए वो पैसे कैसे कहीं चले गए सो पैसे कैसे डील होंगे बिकॉज यू आर स्टार्टिंग अ बिजनेस टू मेक मनी एट द एंड सो हाउ इज दैट मनी
Yeah.
एक्चुअली being distributed A and B reused or re to make more money uh, or reinvest it. So to
Yeah.
make those decisions, you need to lay out a framework कि पैसे कितने कहाँ से आएंगे कितने कैसे बटेंगे कितने हमने री इन्वेस्ट करना है कितने हमने रिटेन करना है और ये सब चीजें आपको पहले दिन डिसाइड करनी है
Mm-hmm.
कंपनी एसेट्स कौन ओन करेगा और इससे सबसे ज्यादा जरूरी बात कि इन केस ऑफ डिसोल्यूशन जो लॉयर आपको सबसे पहले बताएगा कि if you've gone to a पढ़ा लिखा lawyer तो he will always
Yeah.
tell you कि in case of dissolution this is how you dissolve the company so that is what needs to be decided on day one the rest of
Mm-hmm.
it can always be decided later on but day one पे this is a must.
That's actually very beneficial. I mean, बहुत सारे लोग जो हैं वो मतलब जाहिर सी बात है you trust your friends and everything, but once you start the dealings and then you take the business forward, तब आपको समझ आती है कि it's not that simple. So
Exactly.
those are actually some really good points. अच्छा, Fahad, let's talk about career counseling and what is going on nowadays. अगर हम देखें तो एक तो we have a lot of information. We have a lot of variety when it comes to degrees, right? Online हमारे पास इतने resources हैं जिसमें बच्चे जो हैं वो YouTube पे या मुख्तलिफ websites पे देख सकते हैं कि what's going on in the world. लेकिन उसके बावजूद भी they're still confused about what they want to do in life. Why do you think that is so?
I think that is primarily because of two reasons. Um,
Mm,
this topic is not discussed amongst parents and children in our society. Um, ज़्यादातर यही होता है कि या ये डॉक्टर बनेगा या ये इंजीनियर बनेगा
mm,
एंड दैट्स इट, या ये फौजी बनेगा या कुछ भी नहीं, और बच्चा कुछ नहीं बनना चाह रहा होता, और चूंकि वो रिबेलियस होता है क्योंकि वो डॉक्टर इंजीनियर नहीं बनना चाह रहा होता, सो देयर इज नो गाइडेंस फॉर इट एंड
mm,
like it or not, but even though regardless of how matter educated most parents are, if you're not
mm,
in touch with academia, you cannot give proper career advice. I might
mm,
not be the right person to give career advice, but someone who's relevant with academia is the right person to be able to give career advice, because primarily they're dealing with students who are getting placed.
mm,
So they know the job market better. They know, since they're dealing with different types of students, they know what aptitude of a person is suited for a certain profession. So they're able to filter out and give career advice. So unless and until you're into academia, I don't think you can give valid career advice either. So we need to have formal career counselors that advise students at a young age to basically check their aptitude, what Merafuture is actually doing. Secondly, I think the the second part of the blame is to be put on the youth as well. They're very
mm,
distracted with the information overflow that you just mentioned, with so much on their screen. There is no social fabric as far as mobile phones are concerned, because you don't see anyone doing human face-to-face interactions even at dinner tables inside houses, right, anymore, because everyone's busy with their own screens. I think that since the youth is so distracted, I
mm,
don't. I think they've lost focus. Um,
mm,
the youth that I get chance to interact with, even mid degrees, they don't know where they're headed. The first question I ask when I interview someone is, "What do you want to do with your life?" And
yeah.
that's probably that takes the most amount of time for them to answer, because
Mm,
80% of them don't know what they want to do with their lives. So as much as we lack career counseling, I think the
mm.
youth is too distracted as well.
They're
So
confused as well.
I that is my 2 cents on this.
Mhm, mhm. No, that's true. There's too much going on, and I think the youth needs to basically determine they need to sit down and decide what they actually want to do. You're right about the information overload thing.
It can be
So,
casual. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone sitting seriously thinking about what they want to do. If you're having fun, I know someone who's a student right now in FAST, who
mhm,
loves hummus, and his hummus is all over Islamabad at petrol pumps. So if you just love something, I know someone who lost some weight and got to know how diet works and how workouts work. He now gives online trainings to people and helps them reduce weight. So if you're entrepreneurial, you just need to start doing something that you enjoy doing, but you need to have some sort of focus and direction. So it's not that hard to
but if
start.
somebody is, for example, pursuing a degree, right? And towards the end semesters, they realize that this isn't for me. What would you advise? Would you advise them to complete the degree, take some advantage of it, and then change it? Or would you advise them to pull out if they feel like doing that?
Um, what I think is that degrees would soon be a thing of the past. I
Mhm,
think the world is probably shifting towards more skill-oriented or education. So diplomas are in the Western world, people rely on diplomas. They basically prefer skills. Degrees are more academic
mhm,
now. So There's no need to change degrees if you're in a degree. There's no need to get in a degree if you want to do, if you know what you want to do. You can just do certifications and keep doing what you're doing. There's no
Mhm.
need to invest 4 years into one routine.
Mhm.
Similarly, if you're in a degree and you finally figured out that this is not for you, you need to
Mhm.
get done with it. It's If
Yeah.
it's only 6 more months, just get done with it, have it on your resume. um,
Mhm.
but then get into what you like the most. My certification in photography is exactly that. That you do your degree, but then venture out. There's no one stopping you from learning at a later age. So you can always
Mhm.
get certified, and you can always practice whatever you find interest in. But then again, if you're in the towards the end of your degree and you have figured out that this is not for you, but you still
Mhm.
haven't figured out what you need to do with your life, then you're stuck.
Yeah.
So as long as you know what to do, you can always start off from there.
Mhm.
There's never too late.
Mhm. So we have another question. It's from Rabia. She's asking, what advice would you give to someone planning to start a business on their own?
So you need to be able to understand what business you're planning to start. If you're planning to make candles, say for example, you need to understand how candles work, and you need to understand the demand of the market. You need to understand the look and the feel of the product. If
Mhm.
in my case I make images, um, I need to fully understand my business first, the
Mhm.
dynamics of it, the ins and outs of it, horizontally and vertically in business terms. But at the same time, you need to have patience and persistence. Your business will not start paying off in the first month. Your
Mhm.
business may not start paying off in the first 6 months. But as long as you know you're doing right, whatever you're doing is right, and as long as your returns are consistent, you're
Mhm.
consistently having consistent cash flows, you're good to
Mhm.
go. Do not rush for profits. If you're starting off, you should not rush for profits. You should rather think of reinvesting whatever profits that you eventually start making to
Mhm.
strengthen and stabilize the business instead of just withdrawing cash. So if you're starting off a business, do not think of drawing profits ASAP.
Mhm. Okay, that's a good point. Acha, there's another question. As an entrepreneur, some people say that it's like you mentioned that degrees are not necessary, but you sometimes there's a lot of backlash in society. People become rebellious and they're like, we don't want to pursue a degree, we want to do whatever we want. But at the same time, they don't have any skills, they don't have formal education, they're not exactly sure what they want to do. They might have a vague. So do you think these people go the way they want to go, or should they take some time and think over things and maybe actually pursue a degree? And that might open some doors for them.
So if someone's been rebellious and they haven't decided on what they want to do with their lives either, they
Hmm.
should be put into some sort of formal education.
Hmm.
But then again, you're right. If they've spent more time and they're still unable to realize what they want to do later on in their lives, they should be put into some sort of formal education, which is a longer duration, like at least 2 years of a degree or 4 years. So
Hmm.
during a degree, they would be able to connect with peers. They would probably be able to meet with people with visions in different directions. So
Hmm.
would be able to brainstorm along the side, be able to connect with teachers as industry mentors, and probably find a channel to do something with their lives.
Yeah. Hmm. So, Fahad, thank you so much today for the session. It was very informative. I learned a lot about photography, and I'm sure the audience enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time. And I would just like to tell the audience that Fahad Raza is available with us. If you want to have one-to-one sessions, if you want to start a business or a career in photography, or if you're planning to start your own business, you are always welcome to have one-to-one sessions with Raza. Other than that, I would like to remind the audience that Merafuture is providing aptitude testing services, And if you're confused about your degree, if you're confused about what you want to do, then there's no harm in trying it. So thank you so much, Fahad. Thank you for joining
Thank
us
you.
today on this platform.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Best.